Today, we are going on a journey across the lands, through the world, to the deepest, bluest ocean you've ever seen. So calm your senses, take a deep breath, and feel the warm breeze. Hear the seagulls croon in the distance, and listen to my voice as I guide you to a faraway land, surrounded by the mighty ocean. My name is Hrishikesh, and this magnificent story is called The Ocean Queen, presented by Dr. Dreams and written by Shumantho Ray. While the world is replete with natural beauty, with steep cliffs and tall mountains, never-ending roads with lush greenery on either side, and beautiful waterfalls in quiet forests, there's a small but beautiful land far, far away. Today, I am taking you on a journey across the vast Atlantic Ocean. A few sea miles away from the Bahamas, to an island laden with the world's rarest flora and fauna, called Mirage, named after the sea goddess who protects and provides for the residents of the island and the seafarers who lose their way. The island of Mirage is nothing short of paradise on earth. And just as paradise is elusive, it wasn't easy to reach Mirage, while the lost men at sea who discovered Mirage told larger-than-life stories about its beauty. Those who could never find it believed it was exactly as the name indicated, a mirage, an optical illusion. No matter what they say, believe me, the island is as real as a rainbow, if only more colorful. It is surrounded by deep blue waters. The sand is soft, with a pink hue, and in daylight, the island shines like a beautiful pink rose against the sapphire background of the sea. In its fertile soil grows the juiciest fruits and blooms the prettiest, most delicate flowers. The air on the island is always warm and salty, but the people are friendly and sweet. The beauty of this island is so enamoring that anyone who's said to have visited it would forget their worldly worries and sink into the breathtaking views that surround them. Legend has it that many years ago, on this very island of Mirage, there was a great big boulder which was later carved into a great big palace for a man of equally great stature called Roberto the Great. Roberto was the bravest of all the sailors on this island. But there were two reasons why Roberto earned the title of the Great. First, he was an avid devotee of the sea goddess Mirage, and his faith in her could move mountains. His devotion to her was so strong that he would set sail during thunderstorms plunge himself into the most dangerous depths of the ocean and bravely retrieve priceless treasures hidden deep within. Finding and restoring these treasures was Roberto's goal, and they were the source of all his riches, fame, and pride. He was the wealthiest of all men and had received the title of the Great after discovering over 100 treasures at sea. He was a big and kind man, respected by the young and the old. Everyone thought Roberto was lucky that he had the guiding hand of the goddess leading him. Every night, Roberto went to bed. He dreamt of a fluorescent ball of light that approached him slowly yet steadily. As it did, it grew bigger and bigger. The light consistently grew brighter as it approached him, almost ready to collide, until a point it grew brighter than the sun. And Roberto eventually woke up. Roberto couldn't get the light out of his mind. He knew it led somewhere, but he couldn't be sure where. Perhaps the goddess was directing him to another treasure, possibly the greatest one yet. He vowed to discover this treasure as well. Roberto was confident he could find it, for he was the greatest treasure seeker in the land. With this resolve, Roberto invited 3 of his best sailors to accompany him on his voyage. Today, we set forth to discover a new treasure, he proclaimed. In unison, they agreed to set sail at dawn. Roberto was seen at the port at the appointed time. 3 of his seamates arrived minutes later and joined Roberto in his prayer to the goddess Mirage. As soon as they finished, the tiny fluorescent light appeared in Roberto's line of sight. He asked his sailors if they too could see the light, but they couldn't. Seabirds with plumage in the most gorgeous shades of blue and purple were crooning as if to welcome the day. The men set sail with great enthusiasm. For hours they continued to sail as they cut through waves, guided simply by Roberto's words, and Roberto guided by the ball of light. The morning sun was rising far beyond the horizon. Dolphins were swimming synchronized on the waves. As the men continued on their journey, the fresh morning breeze was caressing their cheeks, and even the salt in the air smelt sweet. The morning hue spread across the water and made it look like a bed of silky pink roses. At no point did they turn left or right, but simply headed straight into the unending blue of the ocean, with their sail catching the wind. Despite the uncertainties, there was a calm in their hearts, as if in a mystical way, they knew they were going in the right direction. that this was a journey that was meant to be. As the sun started to arc over the west, the men wondered how far they would have to sail without concrete directions. They had sailed so long and so far that everywhere they looked, they could only see the deep blue of the ocean. With no sign of land or even birds for miles, as if Roberto had almost sailed his ship to the point where the sky and earth meet, embracing one another. The men decided to ask Roberto, as he was standing on the deck, with the golden rays of dusk slowly approaching. Suddenly, the fluorescent ball of light that had been guiding him flew like a punctured balloon, passing through the ship's deck into the ocean, where it vanished. "Halt the vessel!" screamed Roberto. His sailors were astonished at their captain's request. They said, "But Roberto, the waves and the wind are too powerful to stop here. The force is strong enough to capsize the ship. We cannot stop here." Undaunted, Roberto immediately dropped the anchor as the ship turned around with full force, bringing it to a halt. The ship's hull began to creak as the waves crashed against it. The sailors feared for their lives as tension gripped the atmosphere. Roberto surmised, since the light went out at this spot, that this is where the goddess Mirage had guided him. And like so many times before, the goddess will protect him and his men. This is where the treasure he was seeking lay. He turned to his shipmates and said, "Men, when life's crashing from all sides like these waves, stillness shall bring peace back into a man's life. And we are voyagers, the salt of the old sea. I'm sure together we can still this ship. They say the universe loves a stubborn soul." And as if to prove that, the waters began to calm, and the ship started rocking less and less until it came to a complete halt. As the glorious sun set in front of their eyes, Roberto realized it was futile to turn back, as he was certain that he was guided here, quite literally by the light, and he wasn't going to leave until he uncovered this mystery. Roberto, in an attempt to calm his men, said, "We must spend the night here if we intend to find that treasure." Roberto thought to himself, "If I spend the night here, the dream might come again, and this time show me the complete way." It was with this hope the sailors fed themselves dry pieces of bread with soft, fresh fish and fell asleep. The sea was calm, and the waves gently nudged the hull in a perfect rhythm, turning the ship into a rocking bed. Roberto kept replaying the episodes of the day in his mind, over and over, obsessed about bringing meaning to the events. Suddenly, a rustle in the water caught his attention. He quickly rose from his bed and ran to the deck. What he saw left him speechless. The light he had dreamt of was surfacing from the ocean's belly. As it rose, it became bigger and brighter. Roberto, unsure if it was his imagination, screamed for his mates to awaken and witness this wondrous miracle. Together, they stood on the deck, hands firmly gripping the railing, their sleepy eyes wide open in disbelief. They watched in shock and awe as the miraculous event unfolded. They all looked at each other as if to reaffirm they were witnessing the same thing. The light was now about to break the surface of the water. In anticipation, the men covered their eyes in the fear of being blinded by its intensity. However, whether the light dimmed or their eyes adjusted to it, no one could say. But a beautiful and attractive maiden appeared through the light. The men were in a trance. A soft, soothing music was heard, almost as if the stars were playing a symphony for their queen. The salty air suddenly filled with the smell of a garden in spring. When they saw her face, they were mesmerized, for they had never seen beauty as stunning as hers. Her face seemed fairer and brighter than the moon. She had large doe eyes that shone like bright emeralds, as if they held the ocean within. With a beguiling smile, she waved lovingly at Roberto and his men. The men were enamored by her rosy smile. Surely she must be a queen, as she wore a tiara made from seaweed woven with the rarest gems. She donned a necklace of bright white pearls, and each pearl must have been the size of a strawberry. Her ornaments were made of seashells, and she glistened as she swam around the ship. Hypnotized by her beauty, the men saw she had long, golden hair all the way down to her waist. But wait a minute. She didn't have the waist of a common maiden. As they continued to gaze at her in wonder, their eyes fell upon her fish-like tail. Instead of legs, she had a tail, and her shiny scales were reflecting the light as colors like ocean blue, crimson red, emerald green danced across the ship. A spectacle as vibrant and majestic as a rainbow after the first rain. The men on the ship were bewitched by this unseen, unworldly beauty and began to feel a little awestruck. An astounded Roberto put on a brave front and asked, "Who are you? What are you?" In a voice as sweet as honey, the mermaid replied, "That's for you to comprehend, Roberto. I am the daughter of the ocean, the savior to lost men at sea. I am the one that guides the wind to your islands, giving you fruits and fish. I am what fables depict, and no person alive has ever been able to see with their eyes. I am your goddess, Roberto. Roberto's eyes widened in amazement. His heart thumped and his lips quivered. He fell down on his knees and gasped, "Mirage!" The men followed Roberto and went down on their knees with folded hands as the mermaid spoke. "Each of you comes to me with a wish, while you, Roberto, seek the greatest treasure of all. How can I acquire it, my goddess? Tell me," asked Roberto. "Look around you, Roberto," she said, and disappeared in a bright light. As Roberto looked around for the goddess, he saw his men rubbing their eyes, fazed by the divine light. There was now an amber halo forming around the vessel as the sun began to rise. Roberto knew what he had to do. He commanded they set sail and return home. The sailors were still disconcerted by the recent events. They asked Roberto, "Whatever happened on the ship, was it real? Did you know that was going to happen? Was it your intention that we witness what we did?" Roberto said nothing, but smiled. As soon as the ship docked, Roberto asked the men to follow him to his palace. They obeyed as he guided them to his safety vault. Inside, he began to divide his wealth into 3 equal parts to be given away to them. The men in disbelief asked Roberto, "What has gotten into you? Why would you give away what you spent a lifetime collecting?" Roberto replied, "For years now, you have been my faithful companions. At sea and in life, through its ups and downs, you stood by me during rough storms. I believe each of you has earned this and are more deserving of it. I will be honored if you accept it." The sailors didn't know what to say. Instead, they just teared up. Roberto broke the silence. "Well, I promised you treasure, didn't I?" With this, Roberto laughed heartily as his men smiled. They returned home with light hearts and heavy carriages. Roberto, too, retired to his bed soon after. That night and all the nights thereafter, Roberto experienced the deepest, most peaceful sleep he'd had in ages.